France, winter of 1316. The snow never stopped. The crops had failed. Again, cattle were dead, their frozen bones stacked along the roads. Bread was gone. And in the isolated village of Montaillou, tucked into the mountains, the villagers faced a choice: die or feed. It started quietly. A boy was found dead near the woods, frozen face down. His mother wept and they buried him. But the next day, his grave was empty. And someone had taken the firewood from the altar to build a cooking pit. People whispered, accused. But no one spoke openly. Not until the Martin family disappeared. 7 people, gone overnight. Neighbors found their door kicked in, blood frozen on the threshold. Inside, nothing, no bodies. Only a pot, still warm, with something thick and fatty inside. The priest called a meeting, demanded answers. But he knew. Everyone did. That night he left the church in silence, and by morning, he was hanging upside down from the bell tower, his tongue cut out and stuffed in his own hand. From then on, the village changed. People began to mark their doors with symbols. Those who were sick or weak or old were no longer seen in spring. Some said it was mercy, others said it was preparation, because they weren't killing to eat. They were choosing who would be eaten, and they kept lists. By the time relief came in late summer of 1317, the village was down to 30 souls from over 200. The bishop who visited Montaillou described them as quiet, thin, and unwilling to speak of the winter. He found mass graves, not dug, but torn into the ground. Burn marks, gnawed bones, and one journal entry from a man who survived: "We did not eat the dead, we made the dead." They called it Black 47, the worst year of the Irish famine. Crops failed, potatoes rotted in the earth, and the English landlords demanded rent or eviction. Entire families were turned out of their homes. Some walked for days, weeks, following what they called the Widow's Road, a path to the workhouses. But they didn't all arrive. In the hills of Connemara, a woman named Moira Callahan lived alone in a crumbling cottage. Her husband dead, her sons buried. She was called the widow, long before 1847. But Moira was clever. She trapped rabbits, dried roots, and never left her home. That winter, she began to feed the hungry. A child here, a mother there. Thin soups, boiled grass. Whatever she had, people came to trust her, even follow her. But soon whispers began. A girl went missing, then a man who stayed the night and never left. Then 2 children. One boy returned, weeks later, wild-eyed, starving, unable to speak. He had a burn mark on his chest, in the shape of a skillet. And then someone found the pit. Behind Moira's home, under piled stones and snow, a hole filled with bones. Some gnawed, some cracked open, some very small. When the constable came, Moira sat by her hearth, boiling stew in a pot. He asked her what was inside. She said, "Whatever God left for me." They say he opened the pot, stepped outside in silence, and shot himself in the field. No one ever went near that house again. They burned it from a distance, watched the smoke crawl into the sky. But sometimes, when the snow melts early, bones rise out of the ground, child-sized, cracked, and clean. They called her the Blood Countess. In the late 1500s, Elizabeth Bathory ruled the lands of Hungary with wealth, power, and unimaginable cruelty. She was beautiful, educated, a noblewoman from one of the most powerful families in Europe. But behind the castle walls, she kept a secret, one that would stain history forever. It began with whispers, peasant girls who vanished after being summoned to her service, young maidens never seen again. Villagers were warned, never send your daughters to Chaktish Castle. Then came the rumors that the Countess bathed in blood, not metaphorically, literally. They said she believed the blood of virgins could preserve her youth, that she tortured girls with needles, blades, and fire, that her screams echoed down the stone corridors. One maid was reportedly beaten until her skin peeled. Another, frozen to death in the snow. When a noble girl died inside the castle, the king could no longer ignore the stories. An investigation followed. Witnesses testified. Over 300 statements. They spoke of hidden chambers, secret passageways, and a diary in Bathory's own hand, listing the names of her victims. Over 600, but she was a countess, too powerful to be executed. So they sealed her in her chambers, bricked the windows, locked the doors. She remained there for 4 years, until one morning, her jailers found her still and cold, a single breath left in her lungs. They buried her in secret, afraid her grave would be defiled. Some say she still walks the castle ruins, searching for beauty that time stole. But others say she never left at all. In the depths of London's infamous Newgate prison, beneath layers of rot and iron, was a cell known only by whispers, the Picton room. It wasn't marked on any map. No guards ever spoke of it. And prisoners. They prayed they'd never hear their name called for it. It began in the 1740s during a wave of interest in anatomy and electricity. A surgeon named Elijah Grafton, once respected, now disgraced, was granted access to condemned prisoners. He called it research. The inmates called it hell. By candlelight and scalpel, Grafton tested theories no sane man would attempt. He exposed nerves, shocked hearts, revived corpses for seconds, just long enough for them to scream again. One man was said to have been kept alive for 3 days without a tongue, eyes, or the ability to sleep, his heartbeat controlled by a device of wires and brass needles. They said Grafton believed he could trap a soul, that, with the right pain, in the right moment, he could hold it between life and death. The experiments ended when a fire broke out in the West Wing. But some believe that fire was no accident, that one of the inmates, burned and half dead, escaped and lit the blaze himself. No one claimed Grafton's remains. And no one reopened the Picton room. But decades later, during renovations, a hidden chamber was discovered behind a collapsed wall. Inside were racks, wires, and etched into the stone, a single word carved over and over again: stay. They sealed the room again, bricked it shut, and Newgate prison was eventually torn down. But those stones, they were sold, broken up, used in buildings across London. And sometimes when a house creaks strangely, or a child speaks to shadows in the basement, people wonder if a piece of that room, and the screams trapped inside it, still survives. In the mist-covered cliffs of Benane Head, Scotland, a legend rooted in brutal truth tells of a man named Alexander Sawney Bean. He wasn't a soldier, not a noble, just a man who walked away from society and took something dark with him. In the late 1500s, Bean and his wife retreated into a coastal cave, deep and hidden, flooded at high tide, stretching over 200 meters underground. There they started a family. Over time, that family grew to nearly 50 people, all born of incest, isolation, and a hunger for blood. The Bean clan survived by ambushing travelers at night. No one was spared. Men, women, children. Their victims were dragged into the cave, butchered and consumed. What meat they didn't eat, they pickled in barrels. Bones piled up along the walls. For over 2 decades, the surrounding villages were gripped by terror. Hundreds vanished without a trace. Search parties found no answers. Locals were wrongly accused and executed. Yet the killings continued. It all ended when a group of soldiers, guided by a survivor who escaped the clan's ambush, stormed the cave. What they found was beyond comprehension. Rotting limbs, preserved body parts, human leather, generations of inbred murderers, unrepentant and calm. The entire clan was captured, dragged to Edinburgh, and executed without trial. Some were burned alive, others dismembered. None begged for mercy. To this day, historians debate how much of the story is true. But enough remains in the records to confirm something did happen in that cave. And whether legend or fact, the horror of Sawney Bean still echoes across Scotland's coast. These weren't monsters, they were people. And that's what makes it worse.